Immanuel Wallerstein offered a systems approach to analyzing the world. In this comprehensive work titled The Modern World System, which is released in 3 volumes in 1974, 80 and 89. He looks at the world as a system not in terms of nations, but as systems. Under a system, some nations can come. So, this is called systems approach. A system is defined by the way it is taking part in global division of labor. So, how this area, which consists of many nations, is related to the system of production and distribution in the world. So that is how he looked at things. And another thing is, his approach is analytical as well as historical, global. Analytical as well as historical. Okay. Historical meant specific sequences need to be worked out, specific events and process need to be worked out. It is not simply analytical. So, it is a very comprehensive approach. Okay. This is also called Marxist theory. So this is one of the Marxist theories to international relations. Okay. Like dependency theories, which looked at the world in terms of economic process. Okay. He first explained how this world system developed around 16th century from 1450 to 1640. Okay. And then how various countries took part and what were the process involved. But to simplify matters, I want to do something different. I want to continue with the previous example which shows economic interaction between individuals, doctor and maid. I gave an example of maid working for 1 hour per day, 30 hours per month, but getting 5K. Getting 5K. Whereas doctor gets for 1 hour of surgery 10K. So if the maid doesn't work, doctor will have to do the work, and doctor will lose lot of income. So contribution from the maid is huge, whereas what maid is being given is small. This is called surplus. Marx calls this exploitation. Okay. To Marx, any surplus is exploitation. Even if the maid is given 15K, still Marx will call it exploitation. Okay. So how you look at this example? Mainstream economists, also you can say liberals, for example, people like Ricardo, will say that doctor is getting benefited, maid is getting benefited, and Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage says that you specialize and trade helps all. Okay. Ricardo hasn't looked at the inequality of the exchange. Mainstream economists' answer to this inequality is that let maid become something different, something at a higher value. Lab assistant. So like that. You can say if you take these three, if you take this individual interaction, maid to doctor, very unequal exchange. On the other hand, if maid becomes a lab assistant, then inequality of exchange is reduced because lab assistant gets a higher salary. Next, doctor, equal. Or a capitalist who employs the doctor, who owns the hospital, then he will get much higher value, okay, between a doctor and the owner. Okay. So mainstream economists think that everybody is getting benefited in this process. So it means economic interaction is positive for all. So all individuals gain, all nations gain. Nations gain through trade and through comparative advantage when they specialize in their comparative advantage. Okay. So on this basic thing, let us see what Wallerstein does. What he does is, he looks at it in terms of nations. He divides nations in terms of this process. Some countries are specializing in very high-end activities. He calls them core. And some countries are specializing in a very low-end activities. He calls them periphery. Periphery contribute a lot to the core, but core gives very little to the periphery. So this leads to huge surplus. So core extract the surplus, and surplus gets accumulated. In this process, core become richer. It is not that periphery is becoming poorer, but rather that comparatively core is getting higher surplus. So should we call this exploitation? It is exploitation in the sense that if periphery is prevented from what it can become, or compared to the potential, but if you are seeing what it is, then it is not that periphery is getting depleted. Periphery is getting benefited. So what Wallerstein does is that he looks at countries in terms of core and periphery, and then adds one more layer that is called semi-periphery. Semi-periphery is between core and periphery. So these three layers. Okay. So core, periphery. Some countries are in core and poorer countries are in periphery. And this is the world system. And in this world system, some countries can move from core to semi-periphery, or some countries can move from semi-periphery to core, or any particulars. So this is the system, this is the structure, but within the system and the structure, a country's position can change. So within the structure, position can change. This structure is essentially hierarchical. The structure is hierarchical. Okay. So this is what Wallerstein said. Okay. So let us look at some of the statements he made. This is about core periphery relationship. Core periphery is a relational concept. Relational. What we mean by core periphery is the degree of profitability of the production process. Since profitability is directly related to the degree of monopolization, what we essentially mean by core-like production process is those that controlled by quasi-monopolies. Peripheral processes are those that are truly competitive. When exchange occurs, competitive products are in a weak position and quasi-monopolized products are in a strong position. As a result, there is a constant flow of surplus value from the producers of peripheral products to the producers of core-like products. This has been called unequal exchange. See, what is said here, degree of monopolization and quasi-monopolies, is just that in the example of doctor and maid, there are fewer doctors. So doctor's salary is high, going by demand and supply. Maid, there are many doctors. So going by demand and supply, maid salary is very low. So monopolization is nothing but fewer to sell. Competition and more in number competition means more in number. So Wallerstein is describing in terms of degree of monopolization. Okay, and if the doctors are employed by one owner who sets up a chain of hospitals, then that person, that owner, has monopoly. So one can think in terms of demand and supply, one can think in terms of degree of monopolization. So essentially, this is nothing but an unequal exchange. And Wallerstein thinks that this is how nations are interconnected. Okay, and some are in semi-periphery. Some states have a near even mix of core-like and peripheral products. We may call them semi-peripheral states. They find themselves in the most difficult situation, under pressure from core states, putting pressure on peripheral states. Their major concern is to keep themselves from slipping into periphery and to do what they can do to advance themselves towards the core. Okay, so the world is seen in terms of systems and division of labor. What is the contemporary application? For example, India during colonialism, definitely periphery. But India now, semi-periphery. Okay. Let us take China. Same position, periphery to semi-periphery. And China wants to move towards core. So how can it move towards core? IT, robotics, services. So a country can systematically plan to move towards the higher end. Like maid's daughter becoming a lab assistant, or maid's daughter becoming a doctor. Okay, so this unequal exchange can be upset through future planning, through investing in the right ways. So countries can move from semi-periphery to core, and some countries can fall from core. For example, Italy before industrial revolution was core but became semi-periphery. England came to the core after industrial revolution. So hierarchical organization and the structure, everything remains the same, but positions of nations can move from one to another. Okay, so this is how Wallerstein applied Marxist theory to understand economic process across the countries. So to him, this is how global capitalism is working. To him, all this is nothing but surplus extraction. And higher the surplus, definitely higher the power. Higher the power. Okay. So this is how Wallerstein looked at economic system.